Ojo Aba Meta Meta, third Saturday in October, 29th in Seawall, Galveston, Texas. Galveston, formerly known as Turtle Island, was a marketplace block for selling human cargo during the transatlantic slave trade. That cargo was many of our ancestors who never chose to be enslaved. We must not let this truth of history be revised, and there were others of our ancestors who were already here, drying their eyes from trails of tears. Fourth Saturday in autumn equinox, Libra season, third decan, harvest season. The season where Onile, or the spirit of Mother Earth, thins the veil between Orun, heaven, and earth. Aye. The collective voice of our ancestors amplify their presence, hence All Hallows Eve, Halloween, Dia de los Muertos, and Sankofa, the caravan to the ancestors. These celebrations all fall like leaves off a tree during this season. Sankofa. It means to go back. It means to go back to give thanks and praises to the Creator, regardless of the name in which we call him or her. To remember our ancestors, the ones we know not by name, and their ultimate sacrifice. We go back to remember our recent ancestors and the wisdom their lives left behind. We go back to reflect on where we've been, to be clearer on where we are headed. And this is my personal diary of the last decade of experiences while attending the Sankofa Caravan to the Ancestors, hosted by the Houston chapter of the National Black United Front, and how these experiences changed my life. I'm my Aunt J. Muse, and you are watching and listening to Sankofa Mewa, the Diary of 10 Caravans. Ashe. I painted this in the style of a nostalgic black and white photo for you. Listen. Sankofa. To go back, to go back, to go back to the wisdom, to our riches, our prisms, the power of the bones. Sankofa. To go back, to tribal living, so no one walks this road alone. To find balance and reciprocity, so the winds don't sing the blues and moan. And in our very ancient essence, we grow strong. Sankofa. To go back from the babies to the elders grown. Individualists in our lineage, we need to correct this wrong. Sankofa. To go back to universal love, to reflect the sweet memories of our departed beloved. Sankofa. To go back to correct the earth and change for the fate of what's above. Sankofa. To go back to be a snake charm as smart but as harmless as a dove. Sankofa. Go back. Go back to the water and remember the slaughter of those we know not by name. To hear their voices in the rhythms of the waves. And to give thanks to Oru Oshupa for rotating our days. Sankofa. To go back to our ancestors and recover Ijinle ways. Sankofa. To go back to remember our triumphs, our struggles, and how well they switched hats so that we might find our place to keep the legacies intact. Sankofa. To go back to where spiritual intelligence was regarded as fact. Sankofa. To go back to restore the ancient values and rescue the things the untruths love to say we lack. Sankofa. To go back. Sankofa 2018. The turnaround trip the cemetery, and the black and white dog. Pataki. Oni mi ojo aba meta, owara ogun, odunek ba wa meji di logun, moki di logun, awono jo egba oru. Diary. Today is Saturday, October 20th, 2018, 29 days into autumn equinox. The day vibrated on a 5 again, a day of releasing to the fullness of self. The moon was waxing in the 12th house of Pisces, and it was 11-2 year, a year of mastery. Oh yes. And the year for the people's inventory. Checking your relationships, you know what I mean? My Ile sister and I attended Sankofa as a solo pair because neither of our godparents or our godbrothers were available to attend. A part of me wondered if our godparents did that on purpose, you know, to test our abilities alone, yet they stayed a phone call away. Parents do that sometimes. Spirit opened the way for this to be, so we just allowed ourselves to enjoy it. As I mentioned in the previous diaries, getting no sleep the night before Sankofa was getting to be the norm. I started calling it Sankofa's Eve. This year, I took more time to focus on the effort and the artwork of offerings. The night before, we held a ceremony in nature, giving thanks to our ruling Orisha crowns, Shi to Yemanja as Oya to me. We enjoyed a literal rain bath of blessings as soon as we finished. Definitely a great sign. Come to think of it, it rained every time we were together. She was still La Borisha at the time, and I was an infant priestess. After preparing everything for the next day, I remember a deep meditation within mauve amber walls. The energy flowed into journaling, then a relaxed slumber. All 4 hours. I broke the tradition a little this year. The tradition of getting no sleep on Sankofa's Eve. My Ile sister arrived at my house so early it was still dark. We spent some time adorning in my bathroom. The roads were nearly deserted, so it was a smooth ride. Ibashe Ogun. We were the first ones on the beach that year, period. We got there before dawn and set our tent up, far off to the side from where the main ceremony would be. By the time we finished, the sun was rising. I love Yemanja and Olokun's domain at sunrise. There's nothing like it. The weather was cloudy that year. Oya's presence felt more fierce this year than her usual sunny breezes. She even put 3 ancestral warriors on the front and back of my skirt and a crown that resembled a cloud. We basked in the sunrise while preparing beautiful offerings for the waters, and the seagulls wasted no time in taking our request to Orun. Seashell hunting was a treasure find, and I gathered lots of murex this year. We gathered these sea riches as early birds gather worms. As we were rejoicing, the Mbuff caravan arrived on the beach. We greeted a few people, and I assisted some with setting up the offering table. This was the 21st annual caravan, and sometimes you don't always go just for yourself. We stepped into the middle of the circle briefly, and I remember giving hugs to some children and explaining some things to their mother, and embracing the mothers as well. It was at that point it felt like our time on the beach was done, granted that we got there before dawn to do our praises and our offerings and to give our love. We stayed for the beginning of the ceremony, but we left before Joko. This was the shortest Sankofa I've ever experienced, but still very sound in spirit. My mother, Oya, was calling us to her domain to give thanks at the historic cemetery where I greeted her last year. Birds were usually the only creatures to greet us at the waters of the Sankofa ceremony. This year, strangely enough, a black and gray dog ran around us as we were packing up the tent. He had no owner in sight, and interestingly, this black and gray dog matched my black and white outfit. But it seemed to have a joyful demeanor. He was well groomed, so perhaps he slipped his leash long enough to get some spirit work done. It was just odd to see a dog without an owner at Sankofa, caravan to the ancestors. He bashe Ogun, I said, snapped a picture of the dog, petted him, and walked away. I remembered where the cemetery was without GPS. My mother will always tell me where her house is. We took some time there to meditate with Oya, as if she wanted the time we spent between Yemanja and her to be divided more evenly. We came back early because creation was calling us. Loud. This year's caravan was by far the most peculiar, but the most aware. Ashe.